folks. Welcome to an impromptu special edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. And I'm joined today by really one of the headiest studio cats and live performers that this country has ever seen. A lot of the guys that I have interviewed, he has played with, including Herb Bushler, John Simon, Billy Mundy, Howard Johnson, James Taylor. I haven't interviewed James Taylor yet, but he also was in the blues circuit with Elvin Bishop, and a guy I'm interviewing next week, Nick Gravenitis, learning from the first generation blues musicians, along with his drummer Dennis Whitted. Most recently, I did an interview with George Duke, who passed away earlier this week. And I did the interview with George almost 2 years ago. And at the time, he said he was exclusively devoting his time to DMS, Duke, Miller, and David Sanborn. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you.
You know, just spending a few minutes here on, we lost George, and I think that it was sudden, and I think that's why it was so shocking. But, I was hoping you could talk about the first time that you ever even saw George Duke play.
I don't remember. I honestly don't remember the first time I saw or heard George play.
So how did you guys link up?
Well, I think it's one of those things where we just kind of crossed paths. It might have been at Montreux when I first heard him play back in the 80s. That actually might have been the first time that I recall seeing or hearing him play. And, it was sometimes those things are so brief that you're not able to really form an impression of somebody's playing until you get a chance to really hear them at length. So I think I knew George before I actually heard him play.
Mm-hmm.
The scene at Montreux is such that it's as much of a social scene, I think, as it is a musical situation. So it might have been, one of those things where I, crossed paths at the hotel or something.
You just made it interesting.
My sense of George
is
that, I kind of gradually became more and more aware of his playing over the years, and it's just kind of over a period of time, kind of revealed itself. His playing kind of opened up for me, and I saw the depth and the range of his abilities. And I think I actually worked. I think he hired me once, several times to play solos on people that he was producing. And I think probably my early exposure to him was more as a producer than as a player.
Wow, this is great. Does one particular session stand out at all, or anything like that?
No, I honestly don't. The problem with a lot of that stuff is that just everything kind of runs together.
Don't worry, man. It's okay.
Events don't, they don't present themselves in chronological order.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not as clear to me with George as it is with some of the other players that I've known over the years.
I think
a real chronology about when awareness of his playing or his abilities, but
the reason I wanted
certainly the more and more I became aware of how much he was capable of in the range of his playing and the depth of his talent. It just it's kind of stunning. From his history, starting out playing, as far as I knew, with Cannonball, and then with Frank Zappa, and then on, then with Stanley Clarke. I think I probably, knew him with Stanley Clarke, the Clarke Duke stuff. stuff that they did. I think that was probably my first real awareness of George, you know.
Right, which was of course, the advent of the synthesizer had come in at that point, which was added to in 1973, George, even though I was born in 1978, 1973 was an incredible year because there were no styles in music, and there were no barriers that have been put up now with styles. And so as a result, because of the venues to play, the live accessibility, David Sanborn and George Duke, people like that had opportunities to cross over. I mean, like you said, the same year, George played with Cannon and he played with Zappa. That is pretty heady stuff. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about George was just because you're one of the cats that most recently played with him. And I wanted you to talk about the emotive qualities of George's playing that helped allowed you to be yourself more, if that's even possible.
Well, I mean, you know, what George had in common with so many other players is that his ability to, you know, respond appropriately and musically to whoever it was that he was playing with. And, you know, the hallmark of a great player is somebody who's a great listener. And, you know, being in a situation with Marcus Miller and George Duke, you know, you got these guys who are not only world-class players, but also world-class producers. Mm-hmm. And so they have a sense of, you know, the arc of a song, the arc of a set, and a sense of how to build a song, you know, and a solo in a very compositional way. And I think in George's case, you know, playing with him night after night, and hearing him, you know, play, you know, because we had, you know, pretty much the same songs every night. We would rotate songs in the set, of course, but, you know, the same body of songs that we drew on. And just to hear him, you know, George was a real virtuoso. I mean, he was a prodigy, mm-hmm. You know. And there was always one particular moment in the set that was my favorite. He would play this, play a long, you know, obligato intro to us. It was either Sweet Baby or Rhyme or Reason. I'm not sure which song it was, but he would do, like, you know, sometimes 5 or 10 minutes of just this unaccompanied piano improvisation that was just stunning. I mean, you know, every night it was like getting a PhD course in improvisation with him. I mean, I like wanted to record and transcribe every solo that he played every night and just study it and look at it and just see, like, holy cow, what did he do and how did he get from this place to that place? And, I mean, it was, you know, when you can play with somebody night after night and feel like you're learning something every night, that's an ideal situation. I mean, I had that, you know, and I try to put myself in situations like that where I feel like I can learn something every time I play with whoever it is that I'm playing with. That certainly was true with Marcus Miller. That's definitely true with Joey DeFrancesco. It's definitely true with Bob James, and it was certainly true with George Duke.
You know, the thing I love about David Sanborn is that somehow, well, it's not surprising, but you wound up in this this bastion of multi-ethnic, most righteous music scene. One of them, in the late '60s, you were out in Chicago with a lot of the Southern boys like Elvin Bishop, and you were playing with those guys at the same time. And I think of it, I'm like, my gosh, David has been, because what you just described about George is perfect. It's beautiful. It's like you're learning every day. That doesn't happen enough in our society. But when you're around people that are melodic and can express themselves, you're learning every day, you're growing every day, but yet you've been on that trajectory for 50 years. I mean, that's...
Yeah, well, I try to just always be, learning something new every day. I mean, it's hardly a day goes by that I don't feel like I've learned something new. And to me, that's what you're supposed to be doing in life. It's that simple. It's not it's not an effort. It's not a mystery. It's what else do you do?
Well, but I will.
What else is there to do? I don't understand what the alternative is to that. That's more important, I think, or more relevant. It's like, well, what's the alternative to learning something new every day?
Well, you have to be curious.
Know everything? It doesn't make sense to me.
Can you talk about the kind of you guys were playing? Again, here I am carping on styles, but how would you describe the music that DMS was playing? I mean, were you playing all original stuff? And was there must have been an incorporation of all different styles, but could you talk a little bit about the and did you have any times did you ever expand out to a quartet or anything with maybe additional horns or percussion or something?
As far as styles, I don't know what I think what all three of us shared was a kind of a disregard for those categories or barriers. I mean, it was like it's one continuum, and it's like where does jazz become funk? Where does funk become blues? Where does R&B become pop? Where what I mean? It's like that just always seemed to me, and I think both of those other guys, kind of a useless exercise.
Mm-hmm.
You're the product of all your experiences, and if you play in all those different contexts that people describe as, okay, this is funk, this is pop, this is jazz, this is R&B, this is then you're just that all that music kind of comes to the surface in various combinations. Sometimes the rhythmic basis of it is something that people would identify as R&B. Sometimes it's jazz, but it's not. I don't think it was a preoccupation with either myself or the other two guys. So we just did what we did, and you make the music that feels right for you to make, and it's just you go on that kind of instinct more than and let other people after the fact to describe what it is that you do. It's
mm-hmm.
like, oh, that's R&B. Oh, okay, whatever makes you happy. It's like, okay, you want to you want to file this under R&B? Fine. Is this jazz? All right, okay.
I mean, it's so. Yeah, no, I mean it's so true, and you talk about the venues too. This is very important to my as I go through this piece of our history culturally. Did you feel like there was intimate connections with the audience? I know you can't replicate. The sweaty bars and and the bourbon and the late night jam sessions of Chicago, but like I remember he said you guys were going to play the Detroit Music Hall. There's no doubt the sheer output and energy would have been there just from the band. But did you made an interesting you kind of alluded to Montreux being a social scene more than a appreciation of music, and I take that as active listening. So did you find the audiences were able to really deeply connect, or was it not intimate enough?
Well, I think it's just I don't know if it's I would describe it in those terms. I mean, every situation is different,
mm-hmm.
and I think that probably what happens for musicians is over the years you just develop this kind of intuitive sense of how to you know, what music is appropriate in what venue. I think it has to do more than how you read the audience than as it does with the size of the place. I mean, you tend to play different. I mean, seems like an obvious thing to say,
right.
but it's, you know, more pertinent to what you're saying. You tend to play different in big halls than you do in a small club. So the kind of music that you're playing, the dynamic range of what you're playing, is different. And I think that shapes the music and the set and all of that as much or more than anything else, than more than the nature of the venue. You know, whether it's, I mean, I guess what you're talking about is like, is this more of a pop event or a jazz event or an R&B event? I'm not sure.
Well, let me clarify, because you know, the music that I am totally generated by is, you know, music that doesn't need to be played amplified in a rock palace. That jazz, essentially blues, again, we're not going to do idioms because you're right, it's just music, but, you know, the advent of real heavy rock in the mid-'70s forced kind of trios like DMS to get louder. And some of the subtleties, especially with the electronic instruments and what you can do with your horns, it loses some of that intimacy. That's all I'm trying to say. And I was just wondering if the venues, if what was the smallest venue you played, and were you guys did you find yourself adjusting based on those venues? Because it's just very fascinating to me, the propensity of venues, the amount of places to play, and how you know, you look at your generation and how many of you guys developed individual sounds. And I'm pretty convinced it's because of your access to not just playing live, but playing live and playing with the people themselves.
I think it really boils down into how you're able to hear yourself on stage. And I mean, sometimes it's a simple matter of the quality of the sound system.
Mm-hmm.
In whatever, I mean, because one of the great innovations in these big rock shows is like, you can, especially the more successful, rock or R&B or whatever bands can afford really excellent sound systems. And I've been in Madison Square Garden hearing some people play, and they've managed to make that room
mm-hmm.
sound like a small room. And it's a combination of the way they're playing and the ability of the sound guys and how they use that room, and how they understand the acoustics of that room to minimize the negative effects. And if you're in a situation like that, you can really offset a lot of the problems that are inherent in those big, boomy places.
Right.
Because one of the problems you always deal with is just too much slapback. So where you don't actually hear any clarity of the note, which is what obviously you get in a small room. So, I mean, I'm not trying to avoid your question, but I'm just trying to clarify what really makes, what helps to minimize the difference between playing in a small room and a big room.
You're not avoiding anything. This is why I like to talk to musicians, because you're talking about it. I'm not a musician. I'm a journalist, so I like for you to express this stuff. But I guess did you? But you played different venues, different size venues with DMS. I mean, as far as
and some places that you play are just inherently difficult to play. There's just intrinsic problems with it because maybe it's the whole audience is all the seating is concrete, and so there's just this this frequency that gets boosted and this amount of reverb and slapback that you're never going to completely get rid of. So it definitely changes the way you play, and it's less enjoyable. You know, when you can't, what it is, what affects the musicians on stage, their perception of what they can play, and what affects their ability to play, you know, with some degree of intimacy and some degree of range of dynamics, you know, especially in those more subtle ranges, the quiet parts of it, you know, is all about how you can hear yourself. And conversely, I've been in some small rooms that were just shit to play in. Awful.
Yeah.
Because they were so dead.
Yeah, right.
That there was no,
Right.
you know, you play a note and it would just die. And just awful. You know, and you know, I would have rather been in a, you know, I would rather have the opposite of that. Just at least have the room give you something back. You know, but, you know, for example, I played there's a club which I won't name in England that's completely carpeted. Everything is the walls, and it's like, you know, it's like playing inside some kind of weird tomb. You know, it's where music goes to die.
Right, that's exactly right. But
you know, and it's like, wow, this is so, and it's so hard. You come off stage like feeling exhausted because you worked hard and you get nothing back. So, you know, there's a case of a small intimate room that should be fun to play in, but somebody fucked it up. You know, and they just couldn't, you know, they didn't understand acoustics. So, I mean, it's really one of the best places that I've ever played. There's a new venue, I mean, relatively new, the San Francisco Jazz Center.
Mm-hmm.
Their theater, I mean, their venue for music is extraordinary. It's just, I'm not sure, it's not a large room, maybe five, I'm bad at estimating size of, you know, capacity. I would say 500 people, maybe more, maybe less, I'm not sure. But it is such a pleasure to play in that room. It just makes you want to play.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I've been waiting to find somebody that has played there. And for you,
it's fantastic.
That's really. I mean, listen, but again, I want to go back to this question that you brought up about active listening, and I'm talking about my generation now, David. So it's a little bit. You have to hang with me for a minute, but you know, we're talking about younger generations that have been really inundated and only have been given digital music for, you know, most of their lives. They can't recognize space in music in a live or on the iPod. And there's and the music, the space is the music. So and there's these drum loops, and you know this as a producer. So to me, it's about active listening, and so for you, it's gratifying because you can hear yourself, and you really are. It makes you feel more relaxed, and you can play. But how about the crowds that you hear? Because are people actively listening to because that's what I do when I put on, and because I'd like to do a longer form interview with you about your career, but when I hear John Simon, Living in a Land of Sunshine, not sure the last time you heard your solo on that, but
not for a long time.
I can play with my baby, my two girls, and listen to that over and over, and because I'm listening to it. And it's like, that is what music is. That's what your generation stood for. That's what George Duke stood for. And I just wonder, when you walked off the stage sometimes, you might have felt you played great, but the audience they weren't listening. I'm curious about this.
Well, I mean, this may be not a great thing to say, but I'm up there for myself.
Right on.
And I mean, I'm happy when the audience is wants to involve, because I definitely want to bring people along. I definitely want to play for people.
Right.
But I have to play what I'm going to play. And how I feel about what I play is about how well I feel like connected to some experience that I'm interested in having on the stage with the other musicians. I mean, I've had experiences where I've come off and felt like, oh, Jesus, I didn't really. You know, and somebody said, oh, well, everybody loved it. Well, I'm glad everyone loved it, but I didn't have a good time.
Exactly. I love that's exactly right.
I've come off stage where,
yep.
you know, I felt like I really connected with something, and I played well, and the audience was indifferent or, you know, whatever. It just doesn't. I mean, look, nobody wants to play for people that don't want to hear what you're doing. You know, I'm not suggesting that, but that's not what I base my, you know, thrill quotient on. You know?
No, and you're right. It's funny because there were times where, like, I've read from musicians where they went out for dinner, had a lot to drink before the show, and they knew they just played like crap. But then there were people from the audience coming back saying, "Wow, that was so amazing," and they knew it wasn't, and they had to listen to it. They didn't like it because they knew they played like shit, you know. And that speaks to the artist. It speaks to you as an artist, and maybe a perfectionist. I don't know.
Well, I think you're after something. You know, I mean, and when you're playing, you're after something, right. And sometimes you feel like you connect, and sometimes you feel like you don't. And, you know, hopefully you can have a level of professionalism that, you know, even when you don't connect, it's still, you know, good, it's still professional. And, you know, it's got enough there that it's not a total disaster. But, you know what I mean? I just believe that when you're really connecting on stage, that 9 times out of 10, if you're really committed and involved and emotionally there in the moment, that people are going to understand that. They're going to get that. And they're going to go with you. They're going to come away, the majority of them, with sharing that experience. And not know necessarily, maybe specifically why. It's just like, wow, it's just so great. The music was what was so great about it? Well, I don't know. It was just great. And I think that what it was is just that sense of commitment of the people on stage and their ability to really be in the moment. And because everybody wants that transcendent experience. You know, everybody wants that. That's what music does. It transports you. That's what art does. And if you, as a purveyor of that, you know, can somehow involve people in that process, I don't ever underestimate people. I think people get it. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's got nothing to do with taste or, you know, like in one style, kind of music over another. I think it just has to do with, you know, what it's about, and about making a real connection to something that's beyond you. You know, I mean, I think that's what art's supposed to do, whether it's painting or sculpture or dance or theater or whatever it is. You know, and that's what I look for in any kind of artistic experience, is that transcendent thing.
Well, then you need to go back and listen to this solo you took on this Living in a Land of Sunshine, because it is Dave Holland on bass. And
no, I remember the record. Yeah,
I mean,
I remember that there's another song on that record that's one of my favorite songs ever.
What's that?
A song called "Short Visit."
Oh, you know, I'll tell you, Simon was a wily cat, and that's really, I mean, the thing that is just, you know, I gotta. The idea that you grew up in a time when there was so much regionalism and we were not all interconnected. Bearsville, Chicago, the Bay Area, Houston, the Gulf Coast Sound, and you were absorbing all of this stuff. And now you are where you're at today, and it is just for you at this point to be playing. George was so stoked; he loved that group. So, I mean, talk, if you can, fill the vessels for those who will listen about George Duke and what he will continue to leave for generations.
Well, I think George was so sincere about everything that he did. He didn't approach anything he did with cynicism. I mean, when he played pop music or R&B or funk, he was playing the music that he believed in, the music that he loved, and he was able to invest himself in whatever it was that he was doing. And I mean, I think, and that combined with his extraordinary musicianship and technique and virtuosity is what I remember about him. You know, like I said, that moment, that 5 or 10 minutes that he played as a prelude to one of his songs, that made the night for me. I looked forward to that moment every single night. And I kept trying to talk him into playing 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Come on, George, don't stop. I was always disappointed when he stopped and went into the song, because I just wanted to hear him just spin out these incredible solos.
That's powerful stuff, David. Yeah. We're just touching the tip of the iceberg. I hope you enjoyed this. I'd like to continue with you at a later date, but I really, really appreciate the time.
No problem.
All right, take care.
Okay, thanks, man.
Bye-bye.